good evening, good night, wherever or whoever you may be. I am Alan Arante, and this is the Recluse podcast. I had the pleasure of talking to Jeanne-Marie Olmo. Jeannie is 73 years old. She has traveled the world. She lived in Malta as a young girl. She owned a vineyard. She lectured in anatomy courses and conducted research on cadavers. She was studying pelvic fractures. She is the daughter of pioneer viticulturist and professor at UC Davis, Dr. Harold Paul Olmo. He was an expert in the scientific study of grapes and their production of wine. He was a decorated thinker and respected by his community. He created over 30 grape varieties now called Olmo grapes, and he was a big influence on Jeannie throughout her whole life. Jeanne-Marie Olmo is far too interesting and special to be captured in an introduction like this. The interview reminded me about how personal and fragile these conversations are. She invited me into her home. We sat in her kitchen, just the two of us. We got to know each other. And I really do value that trust that is fostered in these conversations. I am utterly in her debt. We drank wine together, and we enjoyed each other's company, I believe. So without further delay, this is a portrait of Jeanne-Marie Olmo. Okay, so we are officially on the record. It is Monday, January 13th, 5:22 in the afternoon. I have two questions. Who the hell are you? How the hell are you?
My name is Jeanne-Marie Olmo, and I am wonderful. I feel great.
This has been a long time coming. I met you, I don't know, maybe months ago by now.
Yeah,
because of
Thanksgiving.
Yeah. We have a mutual friend, Will, who you know very well. He's an artist around here, around town. So what year were you born, and where were you born?
I was born June 11th, 1946. I was born illegitimate 9 months after the end of World War II. So I figured I was somebody's celebration.
Oh, really?
And then I was adopted when I was 15 days old. And from that moment on, my life has been pretty incredible.
I assume you don't remember anything pre-adoption?
Actually, that would be very safe to say.
Yeah.
Though my earliest memories are around 16, 18 months. I can actually remember
Really?
Grandpa taking me outside for a picture and the lawn was wet. Yeah.
Wow. So,
But just to add something.
Sure.
When I was 60, 2006, California let us get our adoption papers. And my father was in the process of dying. And so I had to concentrate on him and take care of him. But after he passed in June, around November, I went and got the envelope they had given me. And not me, but a friend who's so good on the computer was able to find that I had a sister. My mother had died, but I had a sister. How he did it, I don't know, because both of us have been married 4 times and our names had changed.
Oh my goodness.
That's another long story. But anyway, we found each other, and I was 60, she was 62, and I love her so much, and we've been together ever since. And she lives in Laguna Beach.
Wow.
They didn't even know. She's one of, I believe it was 5 children or 6. Not her, excuse me. My mother was. And nobody knew she was pregnant. She hid it so well. And they lived in Los Angeles, but then she went up to Sacramento, and I was born in Sacramento, and then adopted through the welfare of Catholics.
So, I'm not sure, maybe you said it. Was your sister also adopted, or your mother?
She also was illegitimate, and my mother kept her. And that was hard. And I think my mother was a good person, but she's alcoholic, and she wanted to be loved so much. And you imagine in the 40s, if you're quote unquote easy or something like that, people didn't marry you. And, I don't make any judgment because you have no about the times. I'm grateful that she gave me up. She gave me a great life. And I know every day on my birthday, she wondered how I was. And I used to always send her a mental message that I'm okay, Mom. Thanks. Because I had wonderful parents that I loved.
Yes.
I will always have love. And I think everything good in me is because of them. Yeah. But it was wonderful to meet my sister and meet cousins and all that. And they got to meet my kids. And I had never known a single person of blood behind me. Only
really?
in front of me.
Until you were 60. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you explain? So
in other words, I didn't know anybody who was related to me by blood except my children, my grandchildren.
Wow.
So it's after me. Then meeting my sister, I have pictures. I know my mother, my grandmother. I have the greatest aunt. It's like, and all these are my blood. It's amazing.
Right.
And then we did the DNA, the checkout, and turns out we're 26% American Indian.
No kidding.
But a lot of specifics we don't know because the grandmother came from Mexico and I think it was one of those stories that she was from a kind of wealthy family that had come over from Europe. And I think she got pregnant and she never went back. I think she was kicked out. We don't know for sure, but that's kind of what we picked up on. And then her husband, who was an electrician, died very young, like at 23. But anyway, I have my sister and that's great. And my nieces and nephews and their children. So I have this wonderful family. Yeah.
How old were you when you found out that you were adopted? Have you always known?
Always known.
Really?
I don't ever remember being told. And
I
had two brothers who weren't adopted. My mother had a baby that died at birth, and they got the doctor. And this is 1946. Said, you need a baby. So a month later, they got me. So John Lehman, born and died May 22nd. And I was born June 11th. So I kind of like we both had the double digits. Mm-hmm. And I thank him too. And my father said that to me once. He said, it broke our heart when John Raymond died, but if he hadn't died, we never would have had you. And you're the spice in our life. That's what he told me. Wow. So that's pretty sweet. Yeah. Do you have an older brother, or you said you had two? They both passed away.
Oh, I see.
I had a brother 5 years older and a brother 5 years younger that were their natural, but they both died of cancer, and they both smoked a lot. So.
Oh, really? Did they die of lung cancer?
Not lung, but my older brother died of lymphoma, and my younger brother died of so many different things. It's like he'd had cancer of the colon and heart attacks, and he just couldn't stop smoking. Shows you how an addiction is such a powerful thing. Yeah.
And did they, how old were they when they passed away?
My older brother was 68. And my younger brother, I can't believe he made it to 60. We thought he actually died before. So, he made it a lot longer than we thought. Yeah. And it's just, it's just how he approached life. I remember saying to him, Dan, have you thought about quitting smoking? He said, oh, no, that'd kill me.
Really? So he knew he would never stop.
No, he knew he'd never stop.
Wow.
And so I wish them well. When we were young, we were really close. When we got older, we weren't that close.
And when you say older, do you mean in the teens, the 20s?
I think more like the 30s, maybe.
Oh, really?
Late 20s and 30s. Yeah.
That's where I am now. So I have I have three sisters and a brother. And we're all very close. We don't get into fights or anything like that. But I'm just turned 30. And I sort of wonder what's going to happen in the next 10 years.
I don't think it has to be that way. I think it depends on them. My older brother was bipolar, was schizophrenic, manic depressive, and did a lot of things. And he just struggled. That's why I hope he's happy now.
Right.
And so you can't really judge. My parents were great and raised all three of us, but my brothers had a totally different attitude. And I think it did bother them later that I was adopted and I would be getting a third.
Oh, really?
No, that could be a bit of speculation. I don't even want to go there.
Yeah.
We actually had a pretty loving life growing up. It was kind of a Norman Rockwell, except that for most families, by the way, my father was a professor of viticulture at Davis.
Wow.
Second viticulturist in America. So,
second, you said?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
He was the first. I guess there was a woman for about a year, but then Violetti didn't get along with her and fired her, and then Dad was hired.
Wow.
And that's 1930.
So you're saying it sort of wasn't really a thing.
No.
Schools didn't have these experts.
In fact, that's what my dad did in the 40s, was go to Afghanistan and Iran and Pakistan, all these areas. If you look him up on Wikipedia, Dr. Harold P. Olmo, there's so much that I don't want to just sit here and babble at you, but I'm very proud of him. And he went over there in 1947, 48.
Wow.
Put us on the island of Madeira.
Right.
He went off and he'd either be in a car, on a donkey, on horseback, or walking. And in the Wikipedia articles, there's a whole map. It shows the area he covered. And he collected all the disease resistant, the old plants from the old Fertile Crescent. War had started, but it wasn't devastated like it is now.
Right.
And actually, Dad took a lot of photographs. And after he died, they're all on glass panels.
Yeah.
And I took it and donated it to the Afghan Museum.
Oh, wow.
In Utah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And so, because I thought this is what your country looked like at one time.
Wow.
And anyway, he sent those back to the United States. And that was the basic research for so much, like walnuts and pistachios.
Wow. He's sort of like a Darwin, going to these lands and, grabbing all these samples.
But he had so many near misses that they labeled him the Indiana Jones of viticulture. He had so many episodes where he almost died.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's really, I think one day it would be great if they did a movie, because he was this professor, this young, good-looking guy. He had a rug, which I still have. He bought for $5. It's beautiful Persian rug. It's just aqua. It's not aqua. It's burgundy and black, so the wine doesn't show. And he carried that, and he'd sleep on that up in the mountains.
Wow.
And he would go away for about 4 months, Mom said, and come back to see us on Madeira. And he would be skinny and scrawny. And so they'd fatten him up. He'd stay there, rest, and get stronger. Then he'd go back. And he did that for like a year and a half.
Wow.
And he sent so many specimens to the United States. And he realized something has to preserve these. So he started the geoplasm. It's like a huge greenhouse in Davis, and they keep every grape there is, and it will always be disease-free. So if people want cuttings or places they want to breed.
And these plants are alive. They keep them in a greenhouse.
Yes. And he started that. I can't remember what year. That's all in Wikipedia.
Oh, my goodness.
My brain can't keep it all. But it's they're little things I love to throw out because they're so interesting. Like Dad discovered that every grape variety, their seed has markings like fingerprints.
Oh, wow.
So after Prohibition, he went around California and told people what variety grapes they had. And I remember Pete Segesio, they came up to me and hugged me and said, if it wasn't for your father, we never could have sold our grapes as a variety. It was just red and white. That's all we knew we had. And so it saved a lot of the industry. I mean, it's amazing the little things that he did. The public doesn't know of him, but wine people know of him.
Right.
And because, anybody studying knows of him. I'm sorry about the dog.
It's okay. You can let them in. I mean, they might bark a little bit, and then I'm sure they'll relax.
Stop barking. Yeah, if I let them in. So much has happened in my life, and especially like when I've moved here, I retired here from Davis. And you get to talking because you want people to know about it. But I realize I have done so much, and so much has happened that it kind of blows people away. And I think I lost friends because it comes out like bragging, and I don't really want it to be.
What do you mean? Like what? Like what are some examples?
Okay, it's like I'll give you some examples. Like, we lived on the island of Madeira, but then we also lived in Australia for a year. Dad went over there. They wanted to know if they could grow grapes in an area, and he changed to Australia. And there's even a wine called Olmo's Reward in honor of Dr. Olmo, who showed us our beautiful land could grow such great grapes.
And is that your father that you're talking about?
Yeah. And so he was there on sabbatical, so I went with him. Well, we don't just go. My mother is an avid art and music lover. So we get on a ship, and I got to be on the ship. Beautiful ship.
You remember that?
Orchides. Oh, yeah.
How old are you? What, 10? Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I remember, and we were on it for 6 weeks. And it's like, I know it was special, but you don't really know how special at that age. 6 weeks going from San Francisco to Hawaii, and then Fiji and New Guinea and around New Zealand.
Oh, my goodness.
And then over to Australia, and we started on the East Coast and going around Sydney, Brisbane, Adelaide, and we ended up in Perth, and I lived in Perth, in the Netherlands, in Perth for a year. Then flew back. Then when we lived on the island of Malta in 1962 to 63, because they were going to go independent, and they asked my dad to come and tell them how to grow grapes. And they grew grapes like squash on the ground. And we were on the ship again. I guess that's what, I mean, something like that is pretty special, you know. And it was another beautiful Orient wines. And the British first class is just, you're just treated so special. I miss that so much. It was great. And that time we went from San Francisco to Hawaii to Yokohama, Kobe,
on a
Singapore,
ship.
On a ship.
Oh, goodness.
Which I love because you unpack once and then you go out.
Was there onboard, I don't know what you would call it, but onboard entertainment? Were there like singers in the ballrooms of the ships?
I'm sure. I didn't really go into the ballrooms. I was 15, so I wasn't drinking legally. And, no, it was, but there was like the pool area. And I think of the banquets that they would serve out around the pool. I've never seen such beautiful food. It's like out of a movie. I couldn't have expected it when I went to Alaska. It's totally different. Oh my gosh. I realize now how fortunate I was. It was so elegant. And tea time, because it was a British wines. I love tea time. We'd go and you always dress nice and I was raised with always having manners. And
what are manners?
Manners where you don't chew with your mouth open. I didn't learn how to not interrupt. I'm still bad at that, but I'm working on it. And you held the fork correctly. Now, because it's British, I've always learned to eat with my fork upside down and push the food on. That's a British one.
Oh, interesting.
But you learn to, eat correctly. And then when you're done, if you're not done, let's say you go to the restroom, you put your forks cross on your plate, fork and knife across on your plate. That told the steward not to take it. When you're done, you put the two together and put it to the left. Things like that. And growing up, my parents had many, many cocktail parties. And so we had to learn, and dinner parties. And we always learned to set the table and we'd serve, and you serve them on the left and take it away on the right. Lots of things like that, Oh, and I was going to say earlier, I mentioned that I grew up like in a beautiful Norman Rockwell world, except I was more fortunate than that because Dad had so many foreign students. So we had every color, every nationality.
Oh, wow. Coming to your home?
Coming into our home, especially, and you're talking, Davis was 5,000 when I was born. So maybe it was later, excuse me, in the 50s, like 10,000. I mean, it didn't really get big till the 70s.
Right.
And I can remember one Thanksgiving, we had a dinner party. My mom always cooked for everybody, and Dad would bring home all the foreign students because Thanksgiving is an American holiday.
And they're away from home also,
so
probably.
I counted. We had 27 people for dinner, and I went around and counted 13 different countries.
Wow.
Isn't that, I don't even know if I could name 13 right now, but I just felt, wow, that's so cool. I mean, and they were, they were exposed to a lot of the American ways, and we got to be exposed to their ways, and some of the best conversations. And us kids we were allowed to be in there as long as we behaved,
Yeah.
We weren't like shut off. And I love that because I learned how to be around and appreciate good conversation.
Yeah. So I figure if you were young when this was happening, you've always had an open mind then probably anywhere you've gone. Cause people who stay in the same city, say for instance, a city like Westlake where you don't see that many, black people, for instance. Right. So sometimes people don't know how to act. They think
for me, I never was an issue because we always had them in our home. And I do remember, it's funny how children can be very cruel.
Yes.
I am French, Spanish, and Navajo. I have a dark complexion, not super dark, but I'm olive complected. And I remember in 8th grade in Davis, this one boy, he called me the N-word, and I didn't know what it meant. And he used to
and you hadn't heard it before?
All the time, and I think he probably liked me, but a kid doesn't know that. and I remember going home and asking my parents what that meant. No, I hadn't heard it. I think I was in 4th grade or something, but I hadn't really heard it because that word was never used.
Yeah.
even though at that time, Brazilian nuts were called that. My parents said, no, we don't use that. But I remember asking my parents, why did he call me that? And she said, well, one, probably because he's heard it from his parents, but she said, it shows his ignorance. She said, it's a bad name that's used for black people with black skin. And I said, well, I am probably the darkest in the class, but I'm not that. I remember going back and telling him, okay, Whitey.
Yeah.
But
do you remember his name? That boy's name?
I do. And he became a very big farmer, but I'm not going to tell you.
So your father, he was an expert in wine and grapes and had a PhD, it sounds like. Was he a child on a farm in his youth, or how did he come to be interested?
He grew up in San Francisco, but he always liked growing, and he would, they grew up in the Mission District in San Francisco, and he had 2 brothers and a sister, and the oldest brother worked so the dad and his other brother could go to college, and the other one became a dentist. And dad knew he wanted to work. He thought he was going to go into fruit trees, and he'd always be off planting in a little garden, any of the undeveloped undeveloped plots. And he actually had a nickname that followed him throughout his life at the university. We knew him as Harold. His name was Harold Paul Olmo, but his mother said to his brothers, this is when he was probably in his early teens, where is that damn Jackrabbit? Bring him home for dinner. One brother
Jackrabbit
called him Rabbit till he died, and Jack caught on, and everybody in school called him Jack. And even at the university, they called him Jack Olmo.
And is that because...
And I didn't even find that out till I was 40.
And is the joke sort of that he's like a rabbit in a patch?
He was always down... Yeah, he was always gone, and I don't think the university knows. It was just his name, but it started because he was always working in the soil, always growing stuff. So when... So he thought he'd go into pomology, but 1930s, you go where the job is, and a job opened up in viticulture. And what he was a geneticist. His PhD was in plant genetics. And that's what he spent his life doing. If he had gone into walnuts or something, he probably would have excelled in that, because Dad was a scientist. He loved what he did. I'm very glad he went into grapes and wine, because that was much better for us. I've never had a good walnut wine I liked. But I think he was not a person. He was very modest. He didn't like a lot of publicity. He wanted to be left alone.
Wow. To do his work?
To do his work. And people would say, write a book. And a lot of people did. But Dad didn't that much, because he was too busy writing, doing research that was paying off. And we're talking not like DNA now. We're talking where when he bred a new grape, he would, mark off the vineyard. He would go with a paintbrush and pollen and hit them. Then he would grow. It took like 4 years to get enough to make a little tiny bottle of wine, taste it, and decide this is an example, 20, though he had hundreds. 20, okay, number 2 and number 7 and 8 I liked. So we take those, and then we do another cross. I mean, and that's how we develop varieties. And sometimes it would be anywhere between 15 and 25 years before he, had the grape.
Wow. So it's a lifetime of work, a lifetime of knowledge. At the end.
He never stopped. In fact, when he was sick, when he had fallen, his hip had broken, and he was in the hospital. He was 96, a month shy of 97.
Wow.
I remember saying to Dad, Dad, it's okay. Mom's waiting, and you can go if you want to. And he goes, oh, no, I can't go. I have too much to do. And I said, okay, Dad, then let's get you ready so you can get back home. And I just think he died thinking he was going to go back home. He just died of sleep. Yeah.
To work, to read, or what did he want to do?
He was professor emeritus, and he went to work every day till he was 91.
Wow.
They used to joke that they saw him more than the doctors on staff, the professors on staff. But and then they moved him. He had trouble getting into work, so we turned his living room into his office. No, he worked, and he patented his last grape when he was 96.
Wow.
He did a lot of table grapes, and he did.
And what do you mean by that? Just grapes that you would eat?
Like a red seedless. And one of his famous ones was Ruby Red, which has 4 seeds in it, but it's a huge grape that is so delicious. Japan.
You just eat it like a plum almost?
Yeah, it's like, not even that. It's like, it's so good and juicy, you don't even notice. And you can spit out the seeds and just chew them. But it's a huge grape. It's really good.
Yeah.
If you have a chance, try it. It's called Red Globe. I think I said Ruby Red. That was a different grape. It was the Red Globe.
So your father, he was clearly a smart man.
Right.
What was he also a good man?
I would have to say probably the most honest man I've ever known in my life. My father now was a very strict Catholic, which was, growing up, you have to do all that. Now, I didn't stay with that, but my father never pushed it on people. He just lived it. He truly was an honest man, and I love that. And Mom became a Catholic for him, but then she kind of stopped going. But the principles never left, which was kindness and to be honest. I mean, he was so honest. Mom would say, "Can you drop Jeannie off at school?" And he'd be in a university car. He goes, "No, Helen. This is the university car. I cannot use it for anything personal." "Harold, you're going right by the school, can't you?" But he wouldn't. He was a very, very patient person. I mean, he raised me. He had to be patient.
Right.
And I think he was so smart. He was so successful that there's that pressure kind of put on us. He didn't put it on, but you feel like you have to do. And I know for myself in my life, and I've gone through enough therapy, I totally realized and was able to talk to my father before he died and to explain why so many things happened. But I'll tell you, I became a very successful woman, and I think that's because of that. I always joke that if I had been born 30 years later, I'd be diagnosed and put on medication. But instead, I just became successful. I went to Davis, and I graduated high honors, went to UCSF for physical therapy, had a daughter during that time. Then I got married, and we lived out on a farm, and we raised all our own vegetables while I went to school. And then I went to graduate school in San Francisco. Then I came back, and I ended up 7 years later going back and went to med school and got my master's in anatomy. And I taught anatomy dissection to first-year med students.
Wow.
And also that whole time, I was back on the family farm, and Dad had split it up amongst us 3 kids. So I had 70 acres, and I went organic in 70.
Wow.
And I went organic in 1984. So I managed that farm, but Stuart Dixon of Stone Free Farm, he started out with like 2 acres and ended up with 15. And I had the most beautiful food in the whole world. We were the first to bring the baby vegetables to Sacramento. And so, it just kind of goes on and on. That was one of the things the people I was talking with here, she said, I remember somebody said, and I realized right then I have to quit talking about myself. She said, "Well, why didn't you go to med school?" I was telling about how I taught anatomy. I said, "Well, why didn't you just become a doctor? Why didn't you go to med school?" And I said, "Well, I did go to med school. I had to get my master's, but I didn't want to be a doctor because I wanted my family first. I didn't want to, I know me. I would be at the hospital if anybody was not doing well." And I don't think they've talked to me. But it's like, to me, it was just my life, and it is my life, and I'm not done. I'm 73. I'll be 74 in June, and I love this. I love this life. I've just come to appreciate even more and more, as I've gotten older.
What sort of things have you learned to not take for granted? You've been alive for 73 years.
Yeah.
Or actually, have you ever taken things for granted? Time?
Well, I think we all do when we're young and stuff like that. But I think the most important thing I've learned is not to be so hard on myself. My philosophy, I live my life by the 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. And I really recommend it to anybody because we really do inflict most pain on ourselves. And it really gives you the tools not to. And I am so grateful every day. If I wake up, it's a good day. That's the way I approach my life. And I think back, but I've forgiven myself. I made mistakes, and especially those of us raised in the 50s, you grow up, get married, and live happily ever after. And that's just not real. Life is hard. It's all worth it. But life is finding joy in between those hard times, because they'll always come, but the good times will always come back if you allow yourself to know that. So I would say for me, that's what I appreciate. When something hard happens, I know it's going to pass. It'll be a memory. That was my slogan to get me through grad school. One day, this will be a memory. And it is. And I pray to God I never take another class in my life.
How long did you teach?
About 5 years at UCD. I would lecture to undergraduates and teach them. And then and I was working with Hugh Patterson. He was the main professor. And I loved him. And he was my major professor. And I did my master's under him. And he had me come in and help. When you have 100 med students and you have 25 bodies, because you have 4 to a body. And so we would go through and dissect it. And I loved it. I have probably dissected 100 bodies.
Really?
And I think we're so beautiful. I just think, wow. I think it's amazing how we're built, And my mother, because of that, was a cadaver. And I'm going to be a cadaver.
That's wonderful. You want to give back.
I wanted to give it to Davis, but they won't come down past Paso Robles, so I'm going to give it to UCLA.
Wow, it's very interesting how casual you can say that.
I can remember saying that to my major professor because my research was on the pelvis, because pelvic fractures bled a lot, and so I needed a fresh pelvis. So this man had donated his body. So we're there the next morning. He had died the night before. I hope this isn't too much for
No, please. It's perfect.
We're cutting him off at the waist, and then I had to cut both legs off. And I remember stopping and looking up at Pat saying, "Pat, does it bother you that this doesn't bother us?" And he said, "I think we just have such a good grasp on that the human has left. This is a body, but we're always grateful for that." And I was so grateful that he gave us his body and I could do my research. And
right.
So, but it never was like horrible.
Well, what you're telling me is you literally would cut into people's bodies.
Yes.
And you said
most of the time they've been in a bag of formalin so that they will be preserved. But this one was fresh. He died the night before.
Not frozen, but not cool.
Yeah, he was cool.
To put him in
because he came. They had to preserve him. He died in Sacramento. And
right.
They put him in a truck and brought it to UC Davis. And at that time, the school was in Davis. Now it's all in Sacramento.
Right.
But I remember, and he had died of AIDS. And this was back, in the 80s. And we weren't sure, but we had masks and everything. And I do remember, because we were working, and when you're using like a chainsaw on cutting somebody, a bone saw, it can splatter. Well,
right.
We got it all done. We all cleaned up. We took off our masks and gloves, and then I took off my jacket, and I went, "Oh my God, I forgot. I've got blood on my buttons. I'm taking my lab coat off." And I said to my family, "If I get AIDS, it's because of my research."
Yeah.
But I never did. So that was good.
Wow. So you said that you were doing pelvis research.
The pelvic fractures.
Oh, pelvic fractures. Yes.
Bleed so much.
The bone itself would bleed. Is that what you're saying?
And you can see why, because when I
thank you.
Yeah, when I daughter of a viticulturist always shares wine.
What are just a side note? What are we drinking, by the way?
Oh yeah, we're drinking a really nice Sylvaner by Scribe, and it's a 2017. And what I love, it's only 11% alcohol, but it's a delicious white.
It's very good.
It's got a lot of floral and but not sweet. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this. Cheers. Thank you for having me. I'm just floored with how casual you can, and I'm not disgusted. I'm not shocked, but it's very interesting to me how casual, you can talk about these things and how casual it was when you did it.
And it even surprised me. I remember asking him, but it was so beautiful to me. And I felt so fortunate and I loved it, but I also grew up hunting. That might've been why.
Oh, interesting.
I grew up, shooting dove, pheasant,
and eating
gator, turkeys. Oh yeah. And I would clean it. You earn the right when you hunt. And then we grew up with great respect for guns. Every time we'd go out, we'd have to come back in and clean it, you know.
Would you do that with your father?
Well, no, you know what's amazing? My uncles kind of taught me, but when I was like 11 years old and my brother was 6. We each had our own 22, and we would go out by ourselves and shoot jackrabbits in the orchard. Because my dad, when we were 8, my dad bought a farm outside of Davis, and that's when we moved out to the country because he always loved being out in the country.
Yeah.
And we would go out, and they trusted us, and there was really nobody around. There was a freeway, though, and 22s can go really long, but we learned to shoot those rabbits and drop it because it cries like a baby if you wound it. So they were pests in the orchard, but you learned to drop it. It was a kill. And then sometimes we'd be bored and we'd go sit on the levee. I had Pewter Creek in my backyard, and it was quite wide. And the university always burnt off at that time in the 50s, burnt off the other side of the levee. Ours was very lush and lots of plants. So we would sit on our side and we would compete and make a can dance on the other side. Man, we were so good. So maybe because death was something I was raised with. I held chickens while Dad chopped the head off.
Really?
I had to learn how to clean it. I raised 2 lambs that I killed, and I hung and bled out, and I skinned them, and I gutted them, and let me tell you, it is a lot of work, but I loved it. And then we cooked them in a big pit. It was really cool. But I never wanted to have anything hurt.
Right. It wasn't about suffering.
I didn't raise rabbits because I don't think I could kill them fast enough, and I never want to wound an animal. I want it if I want it for the food, then I want to kill it, and I always went behind the lamb. It never knew.
Right. So that's interesting. So you're saying in a way, you were almost primed, that experience primed you so you weren't shocked when maybe you were when you saw your first body?
No, I never was. I started out nursing in 1964 at University of Arizona, but I really majored more in boys at that time because I was out of a Catholic boarding school. But I remember, and back then as a freshman, we didn't dissect the bodies. We just got to see them. I loved it. It was love at first sight. I just wanted to know more. I just wanted to know how, and then I went back to college 7 years later because I got married and had a daughter. And I knew I wanted to be in medicine, but I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a nurse. And I just kind of went through all the different. University of Davis had a wonderful class. You could spend 1 quarter working 2 weeks at a time in a different department in the hospital to see.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
It's wonderful because I got to know, okay, I don't want to be in the lab. I don't want to be an x-ray tech. I want to be a physical therapist.
You just start narrowing it down.
Yeah.
So, the other thing too, it's very noble too. So it sounds gruesome to say, you have to chop the person's legs off, and then you're studying your the pelvis, the fractured pelvis and stuff. It sounds sort of gruesome, but it's not because you're
gaining knowledge.
Yes, to then help people.
And I injected with this plastic that went in one side. I injected a red into the artery and a blue into the vein. And what we discovered, it came all the way over to the other side, even though there is some separation in the joints, the blood supply. So if you were to have a fracture and you were to close off something, cauterize it so it wouldn't bleed quite so much, it's going to get blood from everything else. And the cup of the hip is supplied with blood by every single blood vessel that goes by it, and so it was kind of cool to do that. No, I loved it because, I loved what I was doing.
Was there some sort of, you see these videos on the internet sometimes where doctors or nurses, they get in trouble. Somebody catches a video of them fooling around with the patient or a body. Yeah. When you were in the I don't know what you would call it, the dissection room, was there some sense of dignity even for this body?
There always was, but there'll always be a few jerks, And what you do is you then correct them and just say, this is a gift they have given us. Like, especially if they're getting around to the penis or something, they cover up their embarrassment by making jokes.
Right.
So what you do is you just bring it back to the scientific level. You don't go there and you don't, chastise them, but you just bring it back. This is a human being, and let's be respectful and remember this is a gift. They didn't have to give their body. They chose to give their body. And usually if you just say something like that, it brings it back down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, that's what it was. So, but overall, no, I think there was always dignity.
Right.
Because, because they're aware also that this is an honor to kind of, and plus, you wouldn't want a doctor or a surgeon to never work on a body. You don't want them to have on the live people to start with. So.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. It also, people end up in the ground, people get burned up. I'm almost, you haven't tried to convince me or anything like that, but I almost want to do the same thing. Make use of this body.
For me, exactly. And it doesn't take up any space on the earth, and which I like. And my kids never have to deal with my body. They call up and UCLA will come over here and get it. That's what they do.
That's so practical.
And then I want to make sure there's money for a big party to celebrate that I lived, not have a body to bury. Yeah.
Right. I think it's a very noble decision, and it's like, how can I say it? A sort of a harsh way of saying it. It's like, what good's your body when we're done?
Right.
It might as well go to a good cause.
Now, I'm a big believer in donating parts, because I really hope people will do that, because it can save. So I haven't actually signed the final paper, but I am 73, 74. I don't think anybody wants my organs, but I heard one thing they really need is skin. And my skin's in really good shape. But I know that it's getting close where, you know what, it doesn't matter, because there are lots of other people donating. I think more people donating hearts than they are cadavers. And they want the cadaver to be complete. Like, you can't give up your heart and then be a cadaver. They need that to teach the doctors, everything that's there.
Right.
I was actually lucky. I got a grant when we were going through med school. The back is the most complicated set of muscles. And on paper, they differentiate it. But nobody ever really sees it. It's really kind of crazy, because it's so complicated. I think and it's yet what doctors probably will see more than anything. So I got a grant to dissect a back out. And I know why they don't do it, because it's a lot of work, but it was so cool. I feel so lucky. My guys got to see a back dissected and you can see why there's so many little movements, so many muscles, because they can go from one vertebrae to the other. They can go from 1 to 2, 1 to 3. They can go sideways. They can go diagonally to allow you all these incredible movements. So I think in doing that, I respect the body more. Now, when I was working as a therapist, which I continued to do, I taught half-time and worked as a therapist. Man, I brought out my Gray's Anatomy, or I would come out with a pencil and paper. My patients knew the anatomy of their injury.
Yes. You can explain it to them.
And then you take better care of it. You understand more. Oh, no, I really believe people, they're cheated of not knowing what's on. Now, if somebody can't take it, fine, just do what I say. But if they can, but most of the time, if you present it in an interesting way, and it's on black and white paper, there's no blood, I found everybody wanted to know more. They really kind of got into it.
So, so we learned a little bit about what your education was like, and you taught to undergrads about anatomy, and you cut up
students.
In graduate students. Yeah. So wait, you earned a master's?
Master's.
Did you ever think of a PhD? Do you have a PhD?
Well, that's what I started out in. I wanted to, if you know the truth, to tell you the truth, it was in 1984. I had been divorced. I was living in Davis. My whole social life was going down to the bar. That was it. I was out in the country, and I just got so bored with it. And everybody's like complaining, oh, I got to do something better with my life. But nobody does. And I said, I have to get myself out of here. Because I was a practicing therapist, and, I had a good job. So I left. I took a job in Dublin.
No kidding. Dublin, Ireland.
No. Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Dublin. Dublin, near San Francisco, and worked in a sports medicine clinic. And my boys were with their dad up in Auburn, and I would drive every weekend to get them. And my daughter was, she was in junior college. So I went there. Well, at that time, that was 1983. Oh my God, it was such a gold chain BMW world. I couldn't stand it.
Really? Wow.
It was just not me. I wanted to go back to the farm. So I wrote a letter in longhand. I still can't believe it, because I couldn't write. And I said, I wanted to get into the program in anatomy. And I said, I it would be too hard for me to have to to take the MCATs. I graduated high honors from Davis. I graduated in the top 10% at UCSF. I believe I've shown that I can do graduate work. Could you please accept me in the PhD program? And they did. I can't believe it. And so, but then, and I went because I wanted to meet people doing something else with their life.
Right.
I have to this day these friends.
And are you saying that you did this after you did some physical therapy? After you did
36 years after.
Wow.
No, let's see. I did therapy. I started med school in 84, and I started PT in 74. So there was a 10-year break.
And then after all that.
But I continued to work because I had to pay for myself to get through school, But I must admit, it wasn't as expensive as it is now. Thank goodness.
And so after all that experience, you said that you then wrote the longhand request.
To get into UCD because I didn't want to have to take the MCATs.
Right.
I mean, I had the kids and I had my job and I had the farm. I was back on the farm to maintain. And so they let me in and when you're a grad student, you have to keep a B average. You can't get a C or D, whereas med students can. So the pressure.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But anyway, and I got through and I worked on my thesis. But for a PhD, I had to do 5 orals and 5 major. And I go, you know what? This is just too much. I'll never see my kids. I just felt like I started when I was 36. So by then I was 40. And I said, this is just too much. And I didn't feel like I had to have a PhD. I got out of my rut. I met people. I loved the teaching. Well, then Pat, the professor I worked with, went to UCSF, was head anatomist there. And he asked me if I would come, but I didn't want to commute that far. And I didn't. And the woman who took over at that time, I really couldn't work with her because I didn't really care for how she taught. She later went on and became a holistic doctor, and she was wonderful at that, and I'm really glad. But our teaching method was different, so that's why I ended up quitting. But I'm not sorry for any of it because it changed my life in such a positive way. So for me, it wasn't that I had to have the PhD; it's that I had to get out of the rut, and I did. So it's okay to stop. You don't have to finish something.
So what did you do after that? You were in your early 40s when you stopped the PhD work?
Let's see. I would have been like 42 maybe. And then I continued with therapy and I switched and I went in to Visiting Nurse Association where I went to their homes.
Oh, wow.
And I did that for 14 years. And I had the farm. And then right before, like when I was around, 62, I left the Visiting Nurse Association and I went to work for a physical therapist in Davis and who did sports medicine. And I loved it. And you have to understand as a therapist, I just loved teaching them anatomy. So I never stopped teaching anatomy. And I loved being a therapist. I spent my life making people better. And I truly believe I was a very good therapist. I mean, what I was good at, and it's not because I'm brilliant, but it's because the more anatomy you know, the better you are at diagnosing. And I was good at figuring out what was wrong. And that's because I knew the anatomy.
So are you, have you always been a detail-oriented person? I imagine for anatomy, that must be it sounds very complex to me, anatomy. There must be so many parts.
I've always done anatomy and grown plants. I am a plant lover. I mean, on the farm, I did, but, I had a great memory back then.
It sounds like you still do.
But I loved the mechanics of it. I loved the physics of the body. I loved the anatomy of the body and the physiology. I mean, I don't know. I just loved the system of it.
Yeah.
The whole thing, like people become mechanics. I was a mechanic of the body. I mean, or I think orthopedists are mechanic of the body. But I mean, it's getting to know the intricate systems and how they balance each other. I mean, when you just take something for granted, like a scratch in your arm, what your body does to heal that is truly a miracle. It's just amazing.
Has that always fascinated you?
Always, yeah.
When, can you think back to if not a moment, can you think back to a period where you said, I like this stuff. Like, this is what I want to do. Were you in your teens, 20s?
No, because growing up, I'd been in Catholic boarding school, and then I went to college, and it was never like, if I'd go to college, it's where are you going to college? And of course, you had about 3 choices. Do you want to be a secretary? Do you want to be a nurse? Or do you want to be a teacher? And I guess I wanted to be a nurse because Dad said, oh yeah, that would be great. You didn't really think for yourself in 1964.
Really?
No.
What do you mean by that? Was there pressure on you and from all directions?
I just understood. I didn't know.
Wow.
If I had known about these medical examiners that figure, I would have gone for that. But
right.
I didn't know. Who knew about those jobs,
What about your father, though? He was clearly an educated man. Did he say, I want something better for my daughter?
No, it was never said. It was just I never wanted to disappoint him.
Really?
It wasn't ever like, you have to do better. It just, I think this is a very typical thing in children growing up. And I say we do it to ourselves. I wanted his approval so much. Yeah. And my father, God bless him, he didn't want to spoil us. He wanted us to grow. And I remember when I graduated from Davis, I'd been out of college when I had my daughter. So I was 20, how old was I? 27 when I graduated. And I graduated, 28. I graduated with high honors, and I went up to Dad and I said, Dad, did you see? I graduated with high honors. And he said, now don't be so full of yourself.
Wow.
And I remember that it totally crushed me. But I was able to tell him, and I realized he was right. He didn't want me to be full of myself.
Wow.
But it was only for him to tell me, wow, what a good job. And
did he ever tell you that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And we talked about it. I mean, that generation, anybody in their 70s will relate to this. It's like, I was my daddy's girl, and I was on his lap all the time, and he always played with my fingers and all that. And then all of a sudden I hit puberty, and he never touched me again.
Oh, really?
And that was traumatic. The little girl doesn't understand why. And I think
oh, goodness.
I spent my life trying to have men I felt like I wasn't worthy, spending my life wanting men to touch me, to hold me because
and the affection,
I'm okay. Yeah, it's
right.
a very typical thing that happens, and I had real abandonment issues. And
when was that? 13?
Yeah, 12,
something
maybe
like
13, that. Yeah.
Do you understand?
Then I was sent away to boarding school, so this all hit at the same time.
Right.
And it's like, what's wrong with me?
So, was it almost an overnight thing? Because I don't know that
it seems like it was overnight to me. I'm sure that it wasn't, but I remember coming home from boarding school. I'm a 14-year-old. I was always small, but I was kind of lanky. Mm-hmm. And Dad, we have dinner together, always had dinner together. Then everybody would watch TV in the family room, but Dad would go in the living room and read. So I would go in there, and I used to get on his lap. I tried to get on his lap. I was 14, and I remember that's when it really hit me. And my dad's like pushing me up, going, oh no, you're too big, Go sit over there on the couch. And I remember, and after much wonderful therapy, that the child is like, I'm being rejected.
Right.
And then I was sent to boarding school, and I felt abandoned. But I've got through it all, and I was able to tell my father all that. And I said, you stop saying I love you. And I said, but I understand. And I said, Daddy, I forgive you. He was probably in his 90s when we had this conversation. Mom and Dad and I by ourselves alone. And I said, I think that's why I've married so much, and that's why I always needed, if the man was gone, then I would find somebody else. It's like, it was such a need. But then I got through it, and I forgave myself, and I forgave him, and he's so cute. We all cried, and he said, well, I love you. He said, I am so proud of you. You are the one I'm the most proud of. It was just wonderful. Yeah. And it touched, it allowed me to go on then. And, let me think. Oh, I lost track because I just was right there back at the kitchen. Oh, I know. He tried for like about, oh my God, a month. Every time we see each other, he'd go, I love you. And after a month seeing him trying so hard to say, and I love you, I said, you know what, Dad? I know you love you. You don't have to say it anymore. Those are just words. You show me your love. That's even better. Yeah, it was really cute though. He tried.
Yeah, I can, I'm not a father myself, but I have sisters. I have two I have 3 nieces. I have a baby sister who is 12 going on 13.
Yeah.
And
very precious age.
And we didn't have a father. So I was the oldest. I'm 30 and my sister's 12. So you can imagine.
So never stop hugging her.
And it's sort of subconscious. Because I didn't have a father growing up.
Right.
She didn't have a father growing up. But what you're saying about, the girl becoming a young woman and the father not wanting
showing physical attention because it's supposed to be bad.
And even as a big brother, not, I'm something maybe like that happened with us. And because you don't want to cross lines. You don't want someone to think like, hey, why is he holding his baby sister?
You should never. But who cares what people think? If you have a good heart and all you're doing is giving her a hug. And I mean, I've always kissed my kids and I always will, And so, and I remember their father saying when they were born, I never want to not hug my kids. And later they kind of got where they didn't. And I remember telling my son, Kevin, you know what? You need to remind him because that's what he said. And so then they started, and that's all it takes is somebody starting. And you just keep it to the affection of love and nothing questionable or dirty.
Right.
Yeah. So you should just say, if you're proud and just give her a hug. You don't have to embrace her for an hour and a half. You just have to give her a hug.
Right. And do you think, because for instance, my wife, Angela, she'll say, oh, and this is along that line. She'll, and I wonder, if it's a cultural thing or if men need it too, but it seems to often be women more often that want the affection or the actual verbal connection. Hey, tell me you love me. Tell me you think I'm beautiful.
I think it's everything. I think, we are the nesters and we want it. I think men want it too, but sometimes because of cultural, they don't think they do, and if they don't want it, if they think they don't want it, then they probably need to do some therapy because it shouldn't matter. To be told you're loved is a wonderful thing. Now, if somebody smothers you, that's bad, and if somebody's on you all the time,
right.
But you know what I'm saying? You find the healthy way to do it. But I do believe all you men out there, hug your children, even when they're in their teens, even when, and your daughters, because they don't understand why, and sometimes you want to kill them. So every time you want to kill them, just give them a hug.
How do you, I have feelings like this sometimes, and maybe a lot of other people do too. How do you put aside that pride? Sometimes you feel pride or you feel silly telling somebody you love them or embracing somebody. How do you put that aside?
You're doing the best you can each day. And if somebody doesn't like it, it's their issue. It's not yours because you've chosen how you want to be. And one is to recognize it. So in that question you just gave me is your answer. How about the pride? What you do is it's not a matter of pride. Do something else you can be proud of. Be proud of yourself to have the courage to be a loving husband, a loving father, a loving brother, a loving uncle, or just a loving human being. I mean, I'm not Catholic anymore, but my religion is kindness, and I learned that from the guy from Nepal.
Oh, the Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama said that. My religion is kindness.
Right.
And do I fail? Yes, sometimes I fail, and sometimes I'll say a jab because I'm really good at sarcastic humor. And I'll go, okay, don't do that again, and I'll apologize.
Yeah.
But it's so nice because what you plant, you receive back. But I know I've been talking like way too long.
Yes. So for instance, let me just ask this. So say, you were saying you felt rejected as when you were a young girl. Is that the red there?
Yeah, that's the red.
Yeah, let me polish this up.
Yeah, Rosso de Montalcino.
I'd like to try that.
It's going to taste strange after a while, but you always go for the second sip. First sip tames the tongue, and then you go into the second sip to enjoy.
So we have a red wine here. I'm sorry, what was it? Yes. What did you say this was?
It's by Mastroianni, and it's a Rosso de Montalcino, and it's from, obviously, Italy. And it's a 2017, and this one is 14%. The other was 11. But I like to try wines from all over the world. Because my dad, I traveled all over the world.
Mm-hmm. And you were all American? Like your father and your mother, your adopted parents?
Yeah, my adopted parents. And actually my birth parents, we don't know who my birth father was.
Oh, really?
So I don't know, but I have a niece that's trying to help me with DNA, and she thinks she found it, but I have to just take some time to really find out. It really doesn't matter to me because my parents were my parents, you know. Mm-hmm. And I never felt the void of a parent. I felt the void of information about family of blood. Mm-hmm. And anytime physical.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
I didn't know anything. I didn't know if anybody had cancer. I didn't know. Yeah, I can honestly say I never had this great need to find them, but I wanted to because I loved my parents so much.
Wow. Do you think
my mother was just like the kindest person? I mean, she was just so sweet, and she was not sweet like sweet, but just really wonderful. And when she died, somebody said to me, it was really true. You know, your mother was a lady. And I looked up the definition of a lady.
And what's that?
And the definition of a lady is someone who makes everyone she comes in contact with feel comfortable.
And she did that.
And that she did. And I try to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a lot about your father. Your mother also had a big influence on you, of
Very
course.
Much. She loved music. I went to many operas with her, and she'd tell me the story. I didn't love it as much as she did, but I learned to appreciate an opera. I would hear, she said, listen how they land on the note. They don't slide up into the note.
Oh,
100%. I love when I'm cleaning the house, I'll play opera really loud, and then I'll sing, and I sound wonderful because I can't hear myself. No, and she just, when we left Malta, here's another little lucky thing. Dad had bought a Volkswagen. We left Malta. We took the ferry over to Sicily and spent 3 months driving from the tip of Sicily, through Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and Paris, visiting wine people along the way. Now, did I know how lucky I was then? No, I didn't. Every day... But I do now, and I'm appreciative. But it's like, did I take that for granted? Kind of, but it wasn't like I took it for granted and was cocky about it. It was just our life.
I mean, you were, what, 15?
15.
I mean,
16.
you don't know.
16 on the trip, and we had just gone the night before to this guy who was a retired man. I wish I could remember his name, and he had the best champagne I've ever had in my whole life. And it was in Champagne, in France.
Wow.
And he only made like 3 cases or something of it, and he served it that night at the dinner. And I told him, you know, I love this champagne; it's so good, and we just got along so well because obviously I talk a lot, and I love life, and I always have. And so when we got ready to leave, he asked my father, he said, is it okay? I would like to give her a bottle of champagne for her birthday tomorrow.
Wow.
And I said, oh, thank you. And it wasn't until we got out in the car and Dad said, you have no idea. He said, you appreciate now what that is. That is an exceptional bottle. And, you know, you are so lucky to have it. So guess how we drank it? It was the greatest story. We're driving on. This is what we did every day when we drove up through Europe. We would go buy salami, cheese, and bread.
Oh, God.
And we would find some beautiful spot along a waterway or something, and we always had a picnic. And we opened that champagne and had a picnic out there with this beautiful bottle of champagne and
beautiful
then some
place.
local red along. I remember it was along water, and it was this grassy area. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. And we did that every day. And then at night, we'd go to a restaurant. Mm-hmm. And that was my younger brother and I, because my older brother was in Germany at that time in the service.
Oh, wow. World War II. No, not World War II. No.
This is 1963.
Yeah.
No. So he was, you know, like he was a Russian interpreter. So he was in Berlin.
Oh, he's a language man.
He was a language man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
and, but I think back, I mean, we just went to all these, we were 3 weeks in Rome, 3 weeks in Venice. We were 3 weeks in Paris, and Dad went down to Montpellier, which I've gone since, and I love, but Mom and I stayed in Paris and lived on the left bank, and Oh my God. I spent a week at the Louvre and I feel like I just barely saw it. It's like, no, I was so lucky. Mother loved art and she taught us. And I tried to do this with my children, and especially my son, Kevin, I think got it, to look at art and to realize the strokes and the use of color and how you can almost tell what artist did it by, they have their own fingerprint on how they're painting. And so when I go to a museum and I'm standing in front of a Cézanne and I'm like 3 feet away or 2 feet away, I am overwhelmed with realizing I am totally standing in the space that he stood in while he was painting. I'm right there.
Wow.
You know, from that, that energy is there. And I just feel so lucky. And in 1962, when we went through Rome and we went to the Vatican, and my father also has met, can you see why people, I just sound my father
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
3 popes. And he had
met them.
Met them. I want to tell you which ones. Pope Pius the 12th, Pope John the 23rd, and we were there.
How does that happen?
He was only there for you. Well, he was such a devout Catholic and he gave money.
Okay.
But he was such a good man. And he became famous in wine, so it kind of grew. But because we were there, we got to sit up. It was Easter Sunday when Pope John came out, who's now a saint. But I loved Pope John because he wanted to bring all the religions together. And anyway, we got to sit up on top of the columns in the Vatican.
Right.
And so we were right at the same level with him, and he came out and blessed us all. And that's because of my dad. But again, I kind of, okay, I didn't realize.
Yeah, my dad just met the Pope, that's all.
Good. I knew it was lucky, but you don't realize how lucky.
When you're that young, you don't, there's no way you can know.
I felt, wow, we got great seats. This is good. But you don't realize till later to really appreciate it. Yeah.
I think, one thing about you that I knew the moment I ever saw you, we met a couple times, and the thing, you just have this vitality, this love for life, where you just get so much out of a moment, it seems like. But I think you learned it or observed it. It seemed like your father had that same bit too, and your parents, I should say, because you're talking about this bottle of champagne that you had. It's very special. You find a beautiful place to sit and have lunch. And that was my that's dad. Living. That's what living is.
Exactly. And we did that all over Europe. We went from the simplest meal for lunch, and we didn't go to the fanciest. And I like that. And Dad never, ever told anybody who he was and he ordered wine. No, he would never. And wannabes go, well, I'm not sure this is good. Just drink it. The best glass of wine is the one in your hand. And if it's not yours and you're somebody's, just be grateful you have a glass of wine. I remember this young girl coming up, like she was in her 20s, and coming to my dad and asking, Dr. Olmo, what's the best wine? And he said, what tastes good to you. And he said, if you love a $3 bottle of wine, God bless you. I wish I did. And that's really what matters. It needs to be what you like, and if you like your red wine colder, fine, then you drink it. That's okay. And it's like, I blend in my glass. If I have a wine that's a little too much tannin, and so many wines now are way too jammy and fruity for me, but I'll keep them and I'll mix them with one that's a little too dry.
So your father, suppose instead of you, I were interviewing your father, and I brought some bottle of wine. Mind you, I know nothing about wine. Suppose I picked out a bottle that looked nice, and I bought it, $25 bottle of wine, and I poured some for him, and we were talking like we are now. What do you think? Was he ever the critic? Like, oh, you picked this bottle? Would he pretend to enjoy it? What would he do?
No. He would just give you an honest. We actually did that once. I had friends over, and they wanted to know. So we got 4 Chardonnays, and we sat and tasted it with him. I don't really care for Chardonnay, but we tasted it. And you know what he did? He tasted it. Because he used to taste like 100 bottles a day.
And you say taste, you mean a sip, not drinkable.
They have I used to go in when I was a little girl. He'd be there tasting the wine. He had a hose, and he had a drain on the floor, and this little white alcove with a shelf. And then he tastes the wine and then spit it out because you get
Right, right.
But I do remember, and then he put down a number, and then he'd taste the next one, and then put down a number.
And it wasn't disrespect. You just couldn't drink it all.
No,
I mean,
you can't.
You're tasting it.
They still do that you should do that. You shouldn't swallow because you'll get drunk and then you can't really taste.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember asking Dad. I remember saying, "Daddy, what if it's really good?" This is how he is. He doesn't make a big deal. He just says, "I swallow." And he just
Yeah.
he had the best sense of humor. Oh my God. But he was very dry. It took me years to realize it wasn't that he wasn't excited like I was. He just didn't show up like I did. I speak Italian and French and English. I talk with my hands. I do have a great love of life.
And he was more stoic, even though his brain was firing off internally. Maybe he wouldn't show it.
Oh no, and he was also of that generation, But he did have a wonderful dry sense of humor. Oh,
it sounds like he didn't complain either. He wasn't one to complain.
Let me say, he would never complain with work. He would never complain at work. Did he complain at home? Yes, he did, because, oh my God, the thing he loved most was having hot plates. We were sitting around. The funniest story were my friends. I had a dinner party. I had this. He lived with me after my mom died. We tried for a year. I couldn't do it. He fired every caregiver I got. I come home. I came home. He's 91. He's on the roof with a chainsaw. I couldn't do it. I had to put him back. And not in a home. He was in a wonderful senior center. But I go, Dad, because I can't go to work. It's killing me. Please do it for me. But we had a dinner party, and we were all coming up with wishes. And, there's all these grandiose wishes, world peace, and, I hope there's rain in the future. And we forgot to ask Dad. Dad's at the end of everybody there is like, 40s, 50s. And Dad said, "Don't you want to know what I wish?" And I go, "Oh, yes, Dad. I'm so sorry." He goes, "I wish the plates were hot." Oh my God. I ran in, stuck him in the microwave. I heated his plate up and put it down for him. But that was so great. But he wasn't a big complainer. He worked all the time. I grew up with him getting up in the morning, and, he'd make breakfast, oatmeal and raisins, oatmeal every morning. And he would go to work. He'd come home at lunch every day. He would eat lunch and lie down, take a nap for 25 minutes, go back to work. Then he'd come home at 5, and then he'd go out and work in the vineyard. He had a vineyard and he had an orchard. He always grew our vegetables. See, I was very lucky. Wow. Dad did not like canned food or anything like that. Everything we grew was fresh, and Mom went to a special meat market. Anyway, he had a wonderful attitude, and I think that's from traveling Europe so much. Mm-hmm. And we always ate salad. That was after our dinner. Never before. And I thought everybody did, but I think that's the French influence. And he was in Brazil. Anywhere there's grapes, he would be gone for weeks at a time. But it's okay. And I would go with him out to the university airport and saw him. They'd take him in a little airplane when he would constantly be coming down here. He was trying to develop grapes that would grow in hot climate. Everybody knew it would grow in cool.
Right.
But he developed grapes that would grow in a hotter climate.
So I have a couple more for you. I think I don't want to hold you too long. And maybe someday we can do it again. I find you fascinating.
I just don't want. I mean, your ears, people, must be burning.
No. Some people, most people are not. I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people I talk to have nothing to say. So not on this platform, but I'm saying in the world, people just don't have much to say sometimes. So I appreciate that you have so much to say. What are your life's clearly not done. You're at this rate you may outlive me. What are you most proud of so far in your life? What are some things you're most proud of?
I'm proud of the work that I did with people. I spent my life making people feel better. But the proudest thing I'm proud of are my 3 children. I have a daughter, 53, who is married to a wonderful man, has 4 beautiful grown daughters. I have a son who's autistic Asperger, and I take my hat off to him because he had such a hard life, and people made fun of him. And he is doing so well, and he's married to this beautiful woman, and they live in Colorado. And I am so proud that I can give him support, and they will always live, just making it. but they're doing it. And
Yeah.
I just the courage that he has. And then my youngest son, Kevin, who is here in Ventura and the
excellent.
director of downtown Ventura organization. And I am so proud of him because he is just, he loves this town and he just wants to bring it into a better life. And that's why I retired and moved down here. And the third thing I'd say I'm proud of is that I really choose to be kind, you know, and I want to continue doing that always. And I'm kind of proud of my quick, sick sense of humor too.
It's good. It warms up a room. You're very nice to be around.
Thank you.
So my last question, and with all due respect, who the hell are you?
I'm a very lucky woman. I think my karma is amazing. I must have done something great in my last life because so many good things have come to me. And I am Jeanne-Marie. My father named me Jeanne-Marie Olmo, but I go by Jeannie, the spelling. And that's who I am. And it's many, many personalities because I'm Gemini. What's lovely now is that I'm in there's a group of us that live here together, and I love art, and they're all artists, and I cook for them, and we have like our artist compound, and Will is part of that, and the greatest joy, they're all my boys, you know, and the girls live upstairs, and it's like, I'm very proud that I haven't let anything put me down completely. I did suffer. I had a horrible nanny, and I've had some horrible experiences. Everybody does, but I don't even think of them. I just let them go. I don't carry a bit of that. So, and that's what I think you have to make choices about, you know. So I'm very grateful to be me, and I'm very grateful to wake up.
Well, Jeannie, I hope you never feel like you talk too much. We love you.
Thank you.
Thank you for welcoming into your home.
Thank you.
Thank you.